Hey guys, welcome to Hope It Helps, and my guest on the show today is Miss Amal Ghandour. Amal, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Khalid. Very, very good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So, Amal, I took a look at some of the work you've done, and I know you have a new book coming out called "This Arab Life: A Generation's Journey into Silence," and the title actually really caught my eye, and I thought I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into where did that come from, how did it come up. But I also know that you have over 3 decades of experience, working in research and communication and community and development as well, and you sit on the board for the Women Creating Change leadership, sorry, at Columbia University. So you've had a lot of experience in a field and in an area that probably I'm not very familiar with or not maybe well informed about. So I'd love to dive into a couple of different topics, looking at the book as well and a few other things. But before we get into everything, Amel, why don't you give all of us a little bit of background about yourself and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Let me see if I can do a halfway decent job of introducing myself. I am Lebanese born, but I grew up in Jordan. At the age of 15, I left for the United States and did my last 2 years of high school there. And then went on to do my bachelor's at Georgetown University's Foreign Service School. Took 3 years off and worked in different professions in order for me to have a better idea as to what I might do with my future. Then went and did my master's at Stanford University and got a master's degree in international policy with the focus on the problem of underdevelopment. And then I basically decided that I am going to embark on a corporate career. And that's what I did for the next 20 years. And what I
Okay.
did is begin to develop expertise in research was, of course, my thing at university, but I did that and communication. And in 1991, when Lebanon presumably had gone into or had basically concluded its 15-year civil war, and I say presumably because it really never did, but that's something entirely different that we can talk about perhaps later. At the onset of, if you like, of peace, I decided, why not come to Lebanon? I've been Lebanese. I used to come occasionally to see, extended family. We lived actually in Lebanon 2 different years in 1967 during the 67 civil war. Arab-Israeli war, and my father moved us to Lebanon, and then in the 1970 civil war in Jordan. So, other than that, I really didn't know Lebanon. I thought, well, here's an opportunity for me to come back or come to my birthplace and see how a country, war-torn country, might reconstitute itself. And then I became, if you like, a veritable Beiruti, and I've been here ever since. As I mentioned, I've been in communication and research for the better part of the last 30 years. In 2002, I decided that I really would like to focus much more on my writing. It was always a lifelong passion. I had not pursued it earlier, and maybe that's a mistake, and maybe not. Marguerite Yourcenar once said that a writer should never attempt writing a book before the age of 40. So, without even knowing it, I followed her advice. And I thought that it was time that I could afford, after 20, 25 years in the corporate world, I could afford to shift my focus and give attention to areas that I was really passionate about, and I decided to focus more on writing. At that time, it happened that a very good friend of mine, Ali Jabiri, was murdered in Jordan, and Ali Jabiri was always one of well, first of all, he was a brilliant artist, and an artist with an extraordinary ability for social commentary through his diaries and through his paintings. He harked from a Lepine aristocracy. So I thought he lent himself very nicely to an historical narrative about the modern Near East through his work and through his life. And I produced my first book, this about this man called Ali, which came out in 2009. I had established also a blog called Thinking Fits that ran for till 2016. And then I decided to go silent for many reasons, some of them quite obvious. There was just too much noise. Um, and I decided that I needed to withdraw and detach myself and just. And that was, around the same time, there was also a tragedy in our family in the year 2011. It was a very painful time for me and for us. So I thought it was really perhaps wise for me to just establish a bit of distance between me and the outside world, and that's what I did. And that's the time when I really began to think if in fact there isn't a second book in me, a story that needed to be told, and around 2018 or so, I began to think very seriously about this, and then here we are with this Arab life. So I don't know if that makes a long story short. It didn't feel short to me, but there you go. That's me in a nutshell.
No, sure. No, I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for sharing, your story and a bit of your background. I think it's always good for the audience to understand, get a better idea of who I'm speaking to and, their story and why we are here today. So, Emma, like I said earlier, we're going to be touching on a couple of different topics that I haven't actually spoken about previously on the podcast. So I'm really excited about that. I like new concepts. I like new challenges and new topics that I'm nowhere near, not even a little bit of an expert or don't really know too much. So I wanted to start here. So I wanted to start first of all. You talk about, one of the things that's important to you is countering the stereotypes surrounding, Arab women. And I'd love to hear from you. What are the common stereotypes? And I guess kind of elaborate what is the issue? What is the issue with them?
Right. Well, I mean, like every story, like every controversial issue, in point of fact, you have, unfortunately, the discourse tends to gloss over the nuances. So when we're talking about
Okay.
stereotypes about Arab women in the West, it's one thing. People assume it's only Western stereotypes of Arab women, but in point of fact, there are plenty of stereotypes in the Arab world about Arab women, right? I mean, these
True.
things tend
True.
to
Yeah.
travel. They tend to transcend boundaries and cultures and ideologies, in fact. So it really very much depends. I've always been interested in countering. Let me put it to you this way: I've always been keen on countering stereotypes of Arab women, but to a great degree, I don't wake up in the morning saying, today I'm going to counter stereotypes about Arab women. I think through the lived experience itself and through your work, you find that you are constantly countering these stereotypes, whether they are about Arab women, whether they are about the Arabs per se, or
Yeah.
any other category of people. We in humanity tend to like to pigeonhole, and we like to pigeonhole because it makes a very complicated narratives and realities much simpler to us. And,
Very true.
and when I'm doing my work through the blog or through my research or through the articles that I write, certainly the books that I write, I don't wake up and say, here's what I'm going to do. When I'm tackling issues about Arab women, inevitably what I'm doing is countering these stereotypes. When it comes to Western stereotypes about Arab women, it's a whole set by itself. When I am, for example, talking about Arab women, and let's discuss something very specific, for example, and it just so happens that this is very much in the news today: the veil, the headscarf, a symbol, if you like, a piece of cloth that has extraordinary power and extraordinary symbolism and extraordinary pull for those who hate it and for those who love it. And I am finding myself almost always, in fact, I found myself almost always over the past 20 years starting with the veil, because typically this is where this is the symbol that people latch onto when they want to comment on on a particular cultural theme, if you like, in the Arab world. And I'm not only talking about Islamic themes per se. So that's when for example, Western publications, whatever, approach me to write an article, and they did, for example, for Eon quite a few years back. The first thing that they wanted to do is to approach the topic of Arab women through, for example, the issue of the veil. And the pieces speak for themselves. There's an extraordinary richness to the life of Arab women, those who are veiled and those who are not veiled. And there's plenty of us on both sides of the spectrum. And I think what is lost in the argument and what is lost in the discourse is that the veil communicates something much larger than a religious trajectory. It speaks to disquiets and pain and cultural frictions, if you like, in our societies that are often ignored when we're talking about the veil. So, whenever I'm writing, I'm inevitably disentangling these issues. I'm introducing them to the text. I'm addressing them with a lot of sensitivity in the hope that by the end of the article, people understand that that if that that when it comes to stereotyping, one needs to be really extremely careful, because you end up denying humanity much of the color, if you like, and verve that we have. So there you go.
Yeah. I think you said something very interesting that I think sometimes gets lost in the translation or gets lost in our perspectives, is that the that stereotypes are not just abroad, but they're also within our own culture. And there's a, like you, and I love the way you said that, say, like, right, stereotyping, you're taking a very complex issue and you're creating a narrative that might be simpler, but number one, you don't get the full story, and the label that comes with that and the picture that you're painting with that could be quite harmful.
Very,
From to yeah,
very.
and you mentioned actually that it's funny that now we're sitting here talking today, and like you said, what we're talking about right now, when using the veil as an example, is very much in the news with everything that's happening, in Iran with what happened with Mahsa Amini, and I saw you mentioned once that that the veil has been weaponized by both the East and the West. And I think the key word there was weaponized because, like you said, it's an actual fact. What is it? It's a piece of cloth, right? But if we're using the example that's happening now, it wasn't even about like wearing it or not wearing it. Is that, oh no, it had to be worn in a very specific way,
Right.
which I
Good
think
hijab
is
versus bad hijab.
absolute,
That's what they call it
which
in
is
Iran.
which is
Yeah.
in my mind, I think that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that even till today, in such I guess, a very open and interconnected world where people have, in most places, people have access to a lot of different information. So you get exposed to different perspectives, different ideologies that still, when you bring it back home, you're still kind of, what's the word? You're still kind of stuck in maybe the past times in a more extremist time, which I believe, at least my perspective, just as an Arab man who's grown up, in this part of the world and so on, I think it's interesting how, as the world has moved forward, we still are in maybe a legacy mindset or legacy thinking when it comes to certain types of issues. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it depends on when you are saying we, we need to be very careful that we're not doing so with a a sweeping brush, if you like.
Sure,
So
sure,
who
of
is
course,
we?
of
There
course.
are certain sections of society that very much like to be entrenched in a particular position. There are other parts that find themselves really evolving with the times, if you like. So it depends. I think if we are, for example, talking about the veil, I think the woman since I mean, the story of the veil over the past 67 years, 70 years is really quite a fascinating one. People don't pay attention to
Okay,
context. They don't pay attention to context. How, for example, the first generation of Arab feminists, for example, in leading countries like Egypt, the first act of the affirmation of that feminism was, in fact, to take off the veil, right? And
okay,
extraordinarily, 20 years later, and you continued with that kind of, Arab feminist trend over the 50s and the 60s, and a growing sense of confidence on the part of Arab women that they are achieving a confident or a solid, robust presence for them in the public sphere, exercising a certain kind of freedom in dress, in professional careers, in life, in a certain kind of liberty in how they conduct themselves in public. And then towards the 70s, you start noticing that there was the awkwardness, the increasingly confident presence of Arab women in many conservative societies started producing a certain kind of discomfort. And you started founding in the 70s, not only because of the rise of Islamism, and we need to be careful. I mean, I think they were very successful in introducing, in disseminating the veil, if you like, but I don't think I don't think we need to give them entirely credit for this, right? I think
okay.
to a large extent in modern times, especially in towards the beginning of the 70s, and then the mid 70s, we started noticing that the veil began to become more visible and gradually become really ubiquitous in many societies, many towns and cities that had in fact put them to the side, if you like, previously. And the reason for this is, I think, that it goes to the very issue of how comfortable society was with the presence of women at the office, on the street, on the buses, in taxis, in restaurants, in other places. And women started finding out that society really was not as there are many sections of society that were feeling extremely uncomfortable with this, and there was a bit of a backlash. And the way that that woman wanted to continue to have a presence in the public sphere is by them simply donning the veil in order for them to be able to go to university, to go to school, to get on the bus, to do whatever they want in the street, in the hope that they establish a certain kind of modicum of understanding with a society that is not entirely happy with them being very free out in the world. And you've started finding also in many ways that the veil, which to some women was imprisoning, to other women was liberating. Because with very conservative families, there was an insistence that they don the veil in order for them to go out and get an education. So here you have one of the
Sure.
most fascinating paradoxes, and I'm just mentioning one of many fascinating paradoxes about the veil, where women who didn't really necessarily want to wear it were happy to, if it meant more freedom and more choice for them when they walked out of the door to pursue a career or education, whatever it is. Mind you, I need to be really, if I may, just be take this a little further. Uh, just to be very careful about the nuance. There are women who wear the veil very willingly for whatever reason,
Of course.
right?
Absolutely.
For
Absolutely.
religious reasons, for a show of modesty, right?
Hmm.
Even an
Yeah.
expression of what they consider rebellion against Western diktats, if you like,
Yeah.
Western dress, Western cultural incursions or hegemony or whatever it is. It becomes really an expression of or a symbol of rebellion, right,
Yeah.
against that kind of Western hegemony, if you like. But there are many women as well. And here's something that we don't pay attention to. There are many women who do not want to wear the veil,
Hmm.
but end up having to in many societies because that is the only way with which they can engage more freely with that society. So it goes to the heart of the question of freedom of choice. You go and dig a few layers deeper, and it's not about religion anymore only, or about patriarchy anymore only. It goes to the heart of it's a combination of these, if you like, and it goes to the heart of the relationship between women and their societies, and to what degree these societies are able to welcome without reservations the presence of women in many of these arenas. And mind you, some of us, let's not kid ourselves, and I'm one of them, some of us have had absolutely no trouble whatsoever. None
Yeah.
with my
Of
family,
course. Yeah.
not with my milieu, not with my setting, not with my, and plenty of other
Hmm.
women like this. Plenty of other women who've never had to consider wearing the veil, never wore it, and there was no problem whatsoever. So again, there's a richness there to the discourse. There's a richness to the lived experience that we tend to forget about. But I think whenever we're looking at the issue of the veil, whether it's in Iran or many other areas, I think we always need to remind ourselves that it goes to the question of freedom of choice. That if these women were free to choose, would they wear the veil or not? Some would very willingly for their own reasons, some wouldn't, but they have to. And this is where we need to be focusing a lot of the discussion, frankly, because this is the one aspect of the argument that tends to be, or the discourse, or the discussion, or the debate, sometimes very heated, that tends to be overlooked. There are women who do not want to wear the veil and have to wear it, and
Yeah.
this is the question that is probably one of the more interesting aspects about this discourse that tends to be overlooked in the give and take.
I think, well, first of all, I personally didn't know the history of the veil and the transition and the different periods where things transitioned from, how it started to the rebellious side to the rise of Islamism and the discomfort within society, and how now it became the access to engage with society. And like you correctly said, I think you hit the nail on the head that it boils down to a freedom of choice. Some wear well very willingly, and for them it's cultural, it's traditional, whatever
Absolutely.
it's religious, whatever the case might be,
And we
they
have
love
to
it. That's
respect that.
absolute.
And we have to
Of
respect
course,
that. These are
absolutely.
women, again, this is a stereotype that a lot of people here, even in the Arab world, have, right? You're
Yep.
walking down the
Yep.
street and you're seeing a veiled woman, and you reflexively think, automatically you begin to form a certain kind of impression about that woman. Plenty of women who are
True.
extraordinarily well educated, very content with wearing the veil. And in point of fact, if I may just mention another angle here, content to have a very serious conversation with modernity, right, and with liberalism. You,
Yeah.
when you go out in the
Yeah. Absolutely.
street, you don't see one kind of veil. You see many kinds of veil. You see many colors. You see women in very different kind of fashion, and so on and so forth. And that's really a very serious and a very earnest engagement with the outside world. And I think we have to have, if we are true to our progressive values, I consider myself a progressive woman. And if I may, I think that every progressive person has to respect that freedom of choice. Women have the right to veil, and women have the right not to veil. The women who have the right to veil, however, don't have a problem in this part of the world. They can go ahead and veil. Nobody's stopping them. The women who do not want to veil have a very serious problem in many areas in these societies because they don't want to
Yeah.
veil and they are forced to by circumstance
Yeah.
or by family or emotional pressure or the other reasons that I was talking about before. So,
Sure. I think no, but I think that's a very important point that you mentioned that like the veil can give off a certain impression to someone like who, let's say you're walking, like the example you gave was perfect. You see some a woman, she's wearing the veil, so I think sometimes you naturally think like, okay, well, you don't know the full story first of all, but you never, it's rare that you're going to get a chance to know the full story unless you really go out of the way to do that. You're going to think, oh, okay, she's wearing the veil, it's traditional, it's cultural, whatever her reasons are, you've now placed her in a certain, box or ideology.
okay.
Oh, that means this is what she believes, this is what she thinks, and so on. So I totally understand that. And coming back, I think you drill down to the heart of all this. Like if you peel back all the layers, it does come down to, freedom of choice. This conversation is not for or against, it's just talking about the reality and the facts that we are living in today. This is what the situation is. And I wanted to transition a little bit over to something you mentioned regarding the importance of native Arab voices, narratives about the Arab world. And when I saw that, the impression I got, or where my mind went, I was like, okay, that's interesting. That means one of two things. Either Amel feels there is a lacking of that, and if so, what is the reason for that? And more importantly, why is it so important to, I guess, amplify the voice of the Arab narrative from an Arab perspective?
Right. So let me start this part of the conversation with a statistic that I came across a few years ago. I don't know if it still applies or not because I haven't seen anything more recent. But let's assume even if it got a bit better, it'll just give you an idea of the state of affairs of Arab books, for example, in the United States. This statistic came from a professor at Georgetown. It just so happened. 2% of books that are translated into English or are published in the United States. So let me flip this. Of the books published in the United States, 2% are translated from other languages. And 2% of that 2% are translated from Arabic, right? So that means that to a large extent, the American reader is reading perspectives about the Arab world and the Middle East that are actually written by his compatriots, Americans. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, of course, there's nothing wrong with that. You've got some excellent work done by Westerners on the Arab world and scholarly and journalistic and I haven't come across novels, but or non or fiction. But I mean, this is not to put down this kind of literary output on the Arab world, but it does present a stark
Yeah.
picture about when an American reader is reading about the Arab world, he's reading whom, right? He's reading for the. In most cases, he's reading an American talking about the Arab world. So that presents a certain kind of perspective, and
Sure.
and it's a perspective that and one cannot judge it. I mean, it depends on you read the book and you judge the book. There's absolutely no way that you can produce or you would even want to contemplate a judgment on this output. But at the same time, there's a lived experience, there's a perspective, there's a journey, there is an interaction with the Arab world that is specifically Arab. And when I say specifically Arab, I don't necessarily mean that it's one and the same experience
Of
that
course.
you and I, you in Dubai, and myself in Jordan or Lebanon or Damascus or Egypt have actually gone through the same experience. So if you were to write a book, you would be basically speaking in my name and thank you very much. Not at all. But I think that there is a native, an indigenous voice here that perhaps has a different kind of emotional and psychological and actual um, experience with this Arab world that would complement, that would add to this body of work, that would offer a different angle, a different kind of lens, if you like. And that just doesn't happen to be there doesn't have there isn't that rich of an output out there. I suspect it's gotten better over the past few years because the statistic that I shared with you is not recent. I think probably it's like 10 years or something like this. We've seen more Arab writers being translated into English and French and other languages. We certainly have our stars in fiction and nonfiction. We've got of course, the very famous ones like Najib Mahfouz and Hanna Mina, and of course, among women, Hanan al-Sheikh, and of course others. You have, of course, Ahdaf Swift was always written in English, in point of fact. Uh, but I think that there's really quite a lot of talent in the Arab world that just doesn't have that kind of opportunity to find a voice in the West. And I think, and I, as a nonfiction writer, I have to tell you, as a nonfiction writer, that's always an issue for me. And it's an issue for even more well-established nonfiction writers who write some extraordinary work in Arabic. Of course, I write in English, but I'm a native voice nonetheless. But there are others who write in Arabic as well and English and have little opportunity to put their work out there in the West. And I
Yeah.
think it's important. And the reason why I think it's important is because it just adds to the richness of the discourse. It adds to the it can only inform and add to what is already out there. Why not? Absolutely.
Why, like, why,
Yeah.
why not? Indeed. I think you touched on something very important, that in terms of when you're speaking about the emotional and psychological, like, experience that you have as growing up in the Arab world, as an Arab, and like you correctly said, your experience and my experience are gonna be completely different, but there are gonna be, if I told a certain story about, whether it comes to think, there's certain commonalities culturally that we can probably relate to a lot, like, the family events, the dinners here,
Of
those
course.
gatherings. It's, that's something that's very
Of
common
course.
across, but it would come, like you said, like us, me and myself and you speaking about it, compared to if someone was someone from from Western society was writing about it. It's not that, like you, it's not putting down the work they've done. Like you said, there's been some incredible work being done,
You
of
can
course,
put it down if it's
but
bad, right?
yeah, sure, yeah, that's
I
fair.
mean,
That's fair.
as a matter of principle,
Yeah,
you don't put down, but you can very much put it down if it's bad. And there's plenty of bad work, by the way, coming out about us. So, I mean, but
yeah,
yes,
of course.
absolutely.
But coming back to, I think, the word used, the emotional aspect, that no one's gonna be able to tell that story better than ourselves and people who are Arabs and who have grown up in this part of the world and so on. One thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit regarding. So I was when I was doing my research, there was something. This is gonna. Okay, so this is gonna open up a very different kind of topic, but it's something that this is and this is my current belief and this is my perspective on things. So I wanted to see what you would be, and we're not gonna get like political. I'm just talking overarching in general. This
Sure.
is how I'd like to approach it. So it was interesting. I was reading that, when you, after the Civil War, when you went back to Lebanon, and, when you had friends that actually stayed there while you went to the States and so on, and when you came back, that they had lived through, the Civil War, and you weren't there, you were studying abroad, and then you came back. So they called you, this concept of the tourist, and that label. I sat down and I was thinking about it. I'm like, first of all, I get what they're talking about. Fine, I'm not. That's a fair perspective. No worries. But I think if
Actually, it isn't
you
a fair perspective, but I'll talk about that when you ask me the question. Yeah.
sure. I think that concept of, so for example, in that example, they're Lebanese, you're Lebanese, by birthright and so on. Okay, they experienced this a very difficult time, and then you came back, so maybe they went through certain things, whatever that made them feel that way, and label it in that sense. But if you take that example as the tourist, that I can identify someone who has the same, we come from the same place, we have the same initial like upbringing, and we should have the same values, on a macro level. I think that label as the tourist, if you apply it on a macro scale and you apply it across, the Arab world, I believe like that kind of label, shows the division in our unity, as Arabs. So I'd love to, that's always been my perspective. So I'd be very curious to get, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. Mine is actually much narrower than this, and it is
Okay. Okay.
specific to those countries that have experienced bloody conflicts, if you like,
Sure.
or extremely difficult conditions. This is, and I wrote actually a post about it in Thinking Fits a long time ago, and I called it "Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay." Right, and that's
Great
when,
top. Great.
and
Great title.
that's when the that's when the tension begins to grow, and the people who stay in the conflict tend to develop a certain kind of jealousy, right?
Okay.
About this experience, about and tend to have a sense of ownership of that experience and of the country itself. So when you have left, and by the way, I didn't leave during the Civil War. My family left many years before as I did. So that was even perhaps an even more acute kind of
I
dichotomy.
see. I understand. I
So when
understand.
you
Okay.
come back or when you come to the country and you begin, for example, commenting on it, offering criticisms about anything at all, the politics or the garbage or the electricity or the performance of the state or commentary on the society itself, corruption or whatever it is, there is a kind of attitude on the part of many who have stayed is, what right do you have,
Exactly.
right, to come and comment or criticize or whatever it is, you left or you were not here or you don't know. And it's an attitude, it's not the same kind of attitude, and I'll share with you some of the nuances. For example, there's the attitude that I mentioned to you, which is, who in God's name are you to criticize our sidewalks or our, you have absolutely no, you left, you have absolutely no right to judge us, per se,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's the other kind of attitude. So once I had a little dinner party at my home, and I'm talking about people who are really my friends. My friends are just a group of very nice people.
Yeah.
And some of them. And by the way, when I say those who left and those who stay, I have to be also. There's also a nuance here that I need to mention. There are
Sure.
people who stayed, but mentally and emotionally left. And these people will tend to be very
Ah.
open with you. They are as
Mm.
critical, as angry, as furious with this country's inability to deal with its demons and with its weaknesses and contradictions and paradoxes and excesses, right? And there are people who have left physically, but not mentally and emotionally. What do I mean by this? I mean, they have left, they live very nice lives, they are law abiding citizens outside. The minute they come to Lebanon, they see a red light and they
Back.
right? The minute they hit the ground, as a friend of mine once said, we were talking about someone who was a very successful businessman outside, CEO or something. I don't want to be too specific, and then comes back here 2 years and he's arrested
Yep.
for embezzlement. And so we're sitting there saying,
Okay.
what in God's name happens to these people? So they leave, they lead very successful lives. They are very high achievers. They do very well for themselves. They come back home, and lo and behold, they revert to some really quite repugnant behavior. And he says, well, they come here and the first shawarma sandwich, and that's it. They've eaten the shawarma and so, but of course, we don't want to make light of this, but I mean, so I need to just introduce this nuance because
Of
there are
course.
many people who have left, but have never really left mentally and emotionally, and those people. So I'm talking about those in this conversation of ours. I'm talking about those who really have this sense of ownership, and I own it. I was here. I experienced it, I lived it, I suffered through it. You have no right, you who left, who led a fantastic life outside or found for yourself salvation or success or achievement or well-being outside, to come back here and start lecturing me. You were not here, you didn't know, you didn't go through it. So at this dinner party, I was talking about corruption in Lebanon. And corruption in Lebanon is um, is a thing entirely its own. It is hideous.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
it is in every nook and cranny, right? Everybody is corrupt because everybody has to be corrupt. Of course, the political class and the economic class are corrupt by choice and by greed and so on and so forth. But many of us find ourselves having to cut corners and indulge in one kind of petty corruption or the other to make life more bearable. And I'm including here even the poorest of the poor who have to get on with their day or, and
Yeah.
indulge in this kind of behavior in order to just make life a little easier. So I was talking about corruption in this little dinner party. And then a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, and if he's going to be listening to this podcast, he's going to be pissed. But of course, I'm not going to be mentioning his name. He looks at me, and this is where the term came from, right? He looks at me and he says, Amal, you talk like a tourist. And I looked at him and I said, is it me who's talking like a tourist or is it you? Because I'm talking here like a Lebanese citizen, because every Lebanese citizen needs to talk about this. Any Lebanese who is a citizen will express themselves in exactly the way I express myself. But you are the tourist. You are the one who thinks that you can ignore or gloss over or pardon or excuse this kind of behavior on the part of our elites. So that's where the label tourist came from. And I used it um, uh, as a title to one of the chapters to talk about my lived experience in Lebanon when I came back. And it's everywhere, Khalid, in Lebanon. You still see it till this very day. This dichotomy, this
Yep.
this we who stayed and you who left. And I have to tell you something. A lot of other societies, if you read about conflict and civil wars and about those who left and those who stayed, you will find that there is absolutely nothing unique about the Lebanese experience. It's extraordinary the degree to which My experience here and the experience of many who came to Lebanon in the aftermath of the civil war really corresponds to the experience of many in other areas of conflict.
Um, I think you said something that's so interesting that I never even thought about, that the when you differentiated between like the physically leaving and the emotional and mental side of it, you
Yeah,
know. And it was interesting that you could say there was those who stayed and they left mentally, you know, they checked out, you know, they, you know, didn't let that affect them in that way. And there's others that know it, you know, really they, you know, they stayed, but it didn't, but nothing ever changed. On the point, I wanted to ask you this because I'm trying to, because like on the story you just told me and that comment, I don't think. Do you think that because if you've gone through that experience, you've kind of like lived it, and whatever perspective you have at the end of it, is it how do I say this? Is it, can our criticisms sometimes, whether right or wrong, and whether rightly or wrongly, the difference between living through it and being away and being able to get a different, you know, perspective about it, does that make a difference? Do you believe that if you've lived through something, you can, the I guess the criticism and perspective you have, I guess, and from from his perspective in that example, he feels it's justified because, you know, he went through it.
right.
I'm
Okay.
just trying to,
So
you know,
yes,
I'm
well,
just
but
trying to get
emotionally,
the
yeah, yeah. And that's a very interesting question. So let me put it to you this way. When you are, and I see it today in Lebanon, Khalid. Now, if you
sure,
remember when I
yeah,
came back in the 90s, I mean, I was in many ways, to a certain extent, and I say this in the book, at the beginning, because I knew Lebanon through my parents' memories, very little memories that I had when I was a young girl, visiting in the summers, our extended family. But I knew Lebanon through books. I knew it through my research at university. I knew it through my interest in politics and my reading on it. I didn't know it in actuality, right? I didn't live it. I was not here. So at the beginning, what I did is I just observed, right? I just sat back and observed to try to get a sense of what this country is about, what this society is about, and just live the experience without necessarily coming at it, if you like, just to dance with it a little,
sure,
before I could really just, I mean, know myself as a Beiruti or a Lebanese, or conduct myself as such, if you like. And what happens when you go through very difficult experiences, very, very difficult experiences, whether they are civil conflicts, civil wars, or world wars, or wholesale economic and political collapse of the sort that we are currently experiencing in Lebanon. Human nature, human nature tends to look for ways to survive, right? And one of the ways that you
yep,
survive, or you think you can survive, I don't agree with that, mind you, but I certainly see it and I understand it. One of the ways that you think you can survive is by developing immunity to the excesses and abuses and injustices and pain and inequity, and just jarring realities around you. You begin to develop a certain kind of immunity, thick layers, all designed to insulate you to the greatest degree possible against what could be a mentally and psychologically and emotionally very difficult way to live day in, day out. So you begin, but the problem is where you begin to develop this kind of immunity, And then you begin to think of it as a certain kind of resilience. Well, it's not resilience, really. And Lebanese tend to like to think of it as resilience, but it's not really resilience. It reaches a point where it becomes obliviousness. You start writing it out, right? Out of your day, out of your thoughts, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm just being resilient. I am, as a person, going to this gala in the midst of this catastrophe in Lebanon, and here I'm burning a lot of bridges. A lot of people are going to attack me for this, but that's fine. Going to galas and parties and having a great time and dancing the night away and woohoo and whatever it is, because that's resilience. No, that's not resilience. That's not resilience. Resilience is something entirely different. That's obliviousness. That's you shutting yourself out of the out of the experience that is very specifically Lebanese for many people in Lebanon. I mean, the World Bank, issues these periodic reports about Lebanon, and we have ourselves now 80% of the population under the poverty line. We have wholesale economic collapse. We have hunger in this country. We have people in Tripoli getting on boats and dying every few weeks trying to escape very dire situations. So, no, when you are doing this, when you're having yourself a good time in this environment, that is not resilience, really. That is obliviousness. But I've seen it as well in the Civil War, Khalid, because I came back in 1980. I keep saying I came back, and I was never here, but so forgive me. I came to Lebanon, I came visiting in 1980 because my eldest sister, Asma, has always lived here, and she was married here and had kids here. So we, every once in a while, I would come to Lebanon during the Civil War to see her and to see family. So I came here in 1980 and stayed for a month, right? An entire month. And I would be invited to dinner parties, and I would go, and we'd be sitting on the balcony, and I, the tourist that I am, I would start hearing barrage of, gunfire. And of course, I'd be mortified and say, "Oh my God, we have to go home or whatever." And the people at the party would say, "Oh no, for God's sake, this is just two streets up. So don't worry about it. We're okay." See? So that I can understand why people would think of it as a certain kind of resilience. And it is in a way. It is in a way a certain kind of resilience. It is in a way. And you understand it, right? Because you want to live. You want to live your
Of course,
youth.
yeah.
You want to enjoy as much as you can of an extremely difficult life. But so it presents a very difficult question. When is it resilience? And to what degree is it resilience? And to what degree you are forcing yourself out of an experience that is that becomes, although you are Lebanese and although you're living in this town, becomes entirely the experience and the pain and the suffering of another country altogether. And that's where it becomes very dangerous. And in my book, for example, I try to describe life in Lebanon here. And in some aspects, you have the people why the reason why people don't understand, a lot of people don't understand Lebanon, including the Lebanese themselves, is they don't really quite. They have to be very. There has to be a leap of the imagination to a certain degree to understand how we live here, and we live here in bubbles, right? We are a connection of bubbles. In order to survive, you create your own bubble, and your own bubble becomes your own country. I mean, it's really quite amazing. It's a surreal kind of experience. But you live in your bubble, your zone, your milieu, your setting, your set of friends, your experiences. And after a while, Khalid, if something happens outside of your bubble, if I'm sitting here in Clemenceau where I live, and a bomb goes off in Corniche al Mazraa, let's say, or a little further off, well, that's another country for me, isn't it? I mean, I feel pain for the people. I am very upset. I am. It's something very close to my heart. But in terms of my sense of safety and security, well, that's just another place. And if it's in Tripoli, Well, that's another planet, right? So one
I
needs to
get you.
be
Yeah, I
careful to
understand.
what degree. Of course, one wants to survive. Of course, one wants to thrive, and that's the remarkable thing also about Lebanon is you have little islands of excellence. If I, what I call it, if you will allow me, and I do this in the book, we are a nation of we have here individual genius and collective failure. On an individual level, extraordinary genius. The artists, the food scene, the doctors, the writers, I mean, quite a lot of verve, right? But the entirety of us is a miserable failure. And
Mm,
so, of course, I understand. We want to survive. We want to thrive. We want to even create. And let's not kid ourselves. Creativity comes in very difficult times, right? I mean, my
true.
own book,
Very
when
true.
I wrote it, was a time of very serious pain. I certainly wasn't a very happy human being. But to what degree do we want to divorce ourselves or do we want to insulate ourselves from what an entire people are going through? I don't mean to judge. I do not mean to judge. I understand, but these are questions. These are difficult questions that have to that present themselves, and to each their own answer. I'm not even judging, but I'm giving my own perspective. I think there's a point beyond which it's not resilience anymore. It's obliviousness, and it's very dangerous for a country if these people want to come together and do something about it.
Wow. That was so many things you said. First of all, I've never, off the bat, I'm not very familiar with everything that's happened. Of course, I know the gist. My fiance, for example, is Lebanese, so of course I've learned as time has gone on. I've learned a lot more. But the way you described it, from on the concept of the immunity and resilience. On the immunity part, and I don't think I've ever spoken about this before, like on a podcast. So here we are. Let's go. For example, me myself, I'm Palestinian. Right now, alhamdulillah, I've had a amazing life. I'm so grateful to my family and so on. But of course, I was raised as a Palestinian with these values and so on. And I see I see everything that's happening. Of course, this is not news. This has been going on for 70 years and so on. And I'm just kind of new into this whole thing. And on the immunity part, I do resonate with that quite a lot, because personally, I feel helpless, and when it comes to that, and it's so, and when you're talking about it, like if I let myself like really, you know, feel all those different things, I probably couldn't go about, my day to day, or enjoy my life or appreciate my life and so on, because I would just be devastated every single day.
Sure.
So when you were talking about the immunity thing, it really resonated with me, because I've never had a word or a label for the feeling that I have, or the way I've, like, I guess, compartmentalized, things in my head. So I do resonate with that a lot. Um, Also interesting what you said about, how you have to be careful that it doesn't become oblivious. And I don't know, and I think this can go on. This we could sit on this topic for a long time, but I'm
Sure.
gonna try to round it off. But I'm just trying to. But from the oblivious aspect, I think there's also, a danger of that, and I don't know how do you maintain, at least for me myself, like, how do I maintain this immunity yet not become oblivious? I don't personally consider it as resilience at all. Myself, I don't feel like I'm being resilient, and I'm not even 1%. If anything, I'm going in the complete, other direction. It doesn't make me feel resilient. I'm purely just doing this for my own, mental, and emotional and psychological well-being. Because I feel if I let myself get into that, it's not gonna really help me, and my life and so on. And also, what you talked about, talking about bubbles, and bubbles within your own country. And I think we as human beings, we only, if we are very like, our day to day is our like the majority of our life. So what's most important is what's right in front of my eyes, here, not what's 5 minutes to the left, what's 5 minutes to the right, what's behind me, whatever. So as long as everything around here in my closest circle that affects my life is okay, I can manage, I can go through it, despite whether it's happening, next door in another country, in my country, I think that's just human nature.
Sure.
And I think this kind of leads us on to talking about your book a bit more. I wanted to really dive into the title. The title really caught me off guard. It was very interesting. A generation's journey into silence. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Silence. I think on one side I can understand, because I feel in my example that I just said about how I feel, I am silent. I don't typically talk about these things. I don't like to talk about these things for my own reasons. But I think that on a you know on a bigger picture, with, for example, with social media, and now everyone has the ability to to have a voice and voice their opinion, and social media has caused revolutions to happen, for changes to happen, for big things to happen. So it was interesting. The title caught me off guard, because I feel like now, personally, in a time, there's levels to it too. Because I do get what you're saying. There's levels. I'm like, on one side, I feel that it's very loud these days, because you have the potential to give that voice. But I also, in my example with that I'm using myself, even with all this noise, I'm still silent in a way. So I'd love to just understand
Yeah.
how you came up with the
Yeah.
title, and what are your
Yeah.
thoughts around that, and the share with us
Sure.
the book story.
Now, very briefly, I'll try to be as succinct as possible. But first of all, the original title was not This Arab Life. The original title was Where Was I? And then
Okay.
when I finished the book, and with the help of one of the readers, a friend and a brilliant analyst himself, uh, alerted me to this, and I'll tell you how it happened now. What alerted me to this term that I used, this Arab life, in the first chapter. And the first chapter, the opener, if you like, is about the 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 moment when a personal when a family tragedy took place, just a little before um, the uh, the 2011 uprising. So we had it was a unique in the sense that there was a very private pain and public anguish, if you like. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I
Yeah.
did, Khalid, and that probably goes more to the heart of the kind of themes that your podcast likes to focus on. So as I, at the beginning, it was extraordinarily active for me on social media and my blog and etc. And then by 2016, it really became just too much for me. And I thought, I'm not able to move forward to progress with writing. And I thought perhaps I might do something really counterintuitive for me, because as a human being and as a woman and as just a person, I never really took therapy seriously. Right? I always thought, unless there was serious
Trauma
reasons.
or an
Right?
event.
I
Yeah.
thought,
Sure.
you have existential angst, deal with it, right? I mean, don't. Okay, but I discovered that perhaps I need to do something really counterintuitive. And in point of fact, I went and saw a therapist in Dubai. I don't live in Dubai, of course, I live in Beirut. I didn't feel comfortable going to therapists here. Not a commentary about them. I don't even, that's not a professional assessment by any stretch of the imagination. I just thought I needed distance. I needed someone who really doesn't know
Yeah.
anything about it. So I started coming
Yeah.
to Dubai once every 2 weeks for like 3, 4 days, do very intensive sessions for her with her for a year. She's a brilliant therapist in point of fact. So at the end of the year, I discovered that I was really attempting to excavate my life at a time when I was trying to excavate this Arab life, the larger thing, the aftermath of the uprisings. And I asked her this
Yeah.
question, and this is in the book. I said, is it a coincidence that I began to dig in to my own life as I was beginning to really understand much better exactly what has been transpiring in the Arab world over the past few decades? She looked at me and smiled. And I took that as my cue. So going back to the issue of immunity and resilience and so on and so forth. I mean, it's again when you sit for therapy, you discover that really what it is if the therapist is good, if the therapist is good, if they're bad,
Sure.
it's a it's a whole other trauma. But if they're good,
Yeah.
what it is a process of very delicate excavation, layer by layer, very delicate, very slow, very deliberate. Because human beings, to survive, to cope day to day, they bury things. We are just very good at burying things. We just
Sure.
trauma, difficulty, whatever it is, difficult encounters, embarrassments, weaknesses. We call it in Arabic, of course, bahbashi. You just tibhash and you just throw in. Uh, and so to excavate is really exactly the opposite process. And of course, that's going to be very painful because you spend a lot of time forming all sorts of narratives about yourself and your life and your childhood and your parents and your work and your character, only for the therapist, if good, to start knocking them down one after the other. Boom, 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 boom. So one
Yeah.
time, she and I were talking, and I said, I think one of my real strengths as Amal is my ability to compartmentalize. I mean, just this extraordinary way of me just compartmentalizing emotions and problems. I compartmentalize. I deal with them. I have no a burden on my shoulder, whatever it is. I just deal with it and I achieve closure and I move on. So she looks at me and she says, and that's in the book as well. She goes, well, yes, that's because you're an emotional cripple. There. So and that was stunning for me. And of course, she's
I'm
right.
sure.
She was right.
Yeah.
And I just looked
Yeah.
at her and I laughed and I said, "Well, I mean, that's certainly another way of looking at it." And indeed, it approached the truth much more to my own interpretation, which, of course, probably without even knowing, I had taken 20, 30 years of building. Um, so this book, basically, look, this book I is was never really planned. I sat down and without a plan, without any kind of notes, and that's for a researcher that's really quite extraordinary. I mean, I tend to be an extremely disciplined researcher, but in this case, I decided, let me see what is happening here, and I just sat down and wrote. And of course, I'm a reader as well, so a lot of what I was reading and what I was interacting with on the page and in the media was playing into the discovery process. And at the end of it, I discovered that I think there's a story to be told here, and that's when I decided to really run with it. But I have to tell you, when I was sitting down, I was intending for it to be a book. I was not sitting down writing random thoughts. I was intending
Yeah.
to be a book, but I didn't want to be limited or I didn't want to be guided because as a writer to begin with, I do not achieve clarity before writing. I achieve it through writing. And especially when it came
Ah,
own
okay.
to my own life, to my own lived experience as a Levantine, to my own generation, and that's the generation that came of political age in the 1980s. I could not possibly form an outline or establish the themes without allowing it to be a real stream of consciousness, a freewheeling discourse, discussion between me and myself and my world to try to understand much better this Arab life. And within this Arab life, I wanted to understand, to come to grips with something that is more specific to our experience as the generation of the 80s. And again, when I say the 80s, I mean that came of political age, that came into adulthood in the 1980s, very early adulthood, late teens, early adulthood. And the jarring contrast at that time between the chronic instability and tumult and trouble in the region and the quietude of the spirit, the silence. Because to our older siblings, I think those who went through the student protest movements in Lebanon and Egypt and in many other countries, and the sit-ins and strikes and disobedience campaigns and so on and so forth. By the time it came to us in the 80s, that was the late 60s and 70s to up to mid 70s. By the time it came to us as the generation that was coming into of political age, it was all gone. It was done. And what we experienced from that moment onward is a very troubled region, and a very and a people and a generation bearing witness to it in silence. So I wanted to take a look at this silence. And I wanted to disentangle the themes in history, in politics, in culture, in the lived experience in contemporary times that might explain to me why we fell silent. And that's what I did in the book. And that's why I call it a journey, because it was a journey.
It's definitely it definitely sounds like a journey. I love what you said about, as a writer, you get your clarity through writing,
Sure.
not by, it's not the end product. And I thought that was really interesting. And the themes you touched on, showing, I guess, representing that, like you said, that time, the 80s being becoming the coming of political age and everything that has led up to it, and the contrasts between, slight, not many, like small generational differences, and the experiences and how things have changed, and even forwarding to where we are today, things have changed all over again, and they will
Of
continue
course.
to evolve. And I think, okay, this is interesting. Given where we are today, would it would you still do you still believe that in we are still a part of the generation of silence, or have things are we now have we moved forward, have we
We
regressed?
might be
what are
descending
your
into
what are
another.
your thoughts? Okay, interesting.
Uh, no, no. Yeah, we might be going into another period of those. But I think what you are looking at, and first of all, I think many of us, really, especially those who consider themselves observers of the scene, or pundits, or scholars, or experts, I think we need to exercise a lot of humility, and we need to be very
Humility.
careful about the business of predicting and forecasting. The Arab world, in many of its
Okay.
parts, not in all of its parts, not in all of its parts, but in many of its parts, or let me put it to you this way, in enough parts, right,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going through a very unpredictable period, right? So I think we need to exercise a bit of humility and understand that a lot of times, instead of commenting and predicting and analyzing whatever it is. We need to sit back and observe and watch. Because almost on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis, we are really being thrown, as they say, hither and thither between events and experiences and so on and so forth. And of course, every country has its own peculiarities,
Of course.
own histories, and
Absolutely.
circumstances. So we
Yeah.
need to be careful about that as well. Uh, so if you were to ask me really, and that's a bit of a delicate question, I think we need to be aware of this unpredictability. And I think we
Okay.
need to be aware that we're entering into a new dynamic in many of these countries, into a new dynamic,
Gotcha.
and it's early days yet. In some parts, I think we might be entering into another phase of silence after a lot of boisterousness, if you like. And in other areas, I suspect. Let me put it to you this way: things are simmering, right?
Okay.
So when
I
they
got you.
simmer,
I understand.
when they simmer, that means something is festering. If something is festering,
Yes.
don't be fooled by the calm. And I think that probably says much of what needs to be said about it. But
Yeah.
very humble this
Yeah.
way. I'm very careful about predicting because in a lot of places we simply don't know. We can draw plausible scenarios and watch
Sure.
them,
Of
watch
course.
how reality plays out.
Yeah.
And I understand that we want to latch on to clarity. A lot of, I hear at dinner parties, especially in a place like Lebanon, lunches, or when we're meeting with friends or whatever it is, everybody wants to achieve clarity. Everybody wants some clarity. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? How's it? Okay, we're talking about collapse. Yeah, but what does it look like? But I'm like, what do you mean, what does it look like? You're living it. So, but you need to know what the next day is bringing, what the next week's bringing. Frankly, as I said to many of them, and they're always clamoring for answer, satisfying answer. I'm always having to tell them, I'm terribly sorry. It's very difficult for me to really provide any clear sense of what is coming. I can tell you it's bad. I can tell you it's very bad. I can tell you that the Lebanese experiment is at an end. That's my opinion. At the Lebanese experiment, as it was put together very early in 1920, when the French mandate started, and then consecrated in 1943 when we achieved independence and created this national pact. And certainly the catastrophic peace that came in the aftermath of the Civil War, that only entrenched our deformities and our um, contradictions and faults, if you like. I can tell you that is we are in very serious need of a entirely new iteration of what it means to be Lebanon and what it means to be Lebanese. But how that is going to play out, very difficult. Very difficult. It's a
Yeah.
fool's errand. It's a fool's errand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you made a good point though, regarding we all we all want clarity in our lives. I've always been the type of person. Only until not many years ago did I realize that I wish I always wanted to see life as black and white, but I've learned now with my experience and over the last few years that it's literally only gray, and if you're lucky, you get some black and white, in some cases or
Absolutely.
not.
Absolutely.
And I think that comes back to us as just people and human nature and fear of the unknown, fear of we don't know what's going to happen. Like you said, given the current situation, given history, whatever, if you sit back and observe, you can probably come up with a plausible, outcome. But how that's going to play out, what's the repercussions going to be, when, who, where, we don't know. So I think being, like you said, being humble and treading on the side of caution and just sitting back and observing, and you let your own thoughts, you decide, or you come to the conclusion that you believe will happen. But I think it makes sense to do that. Also, when you talked about a lot of what we've talked about today, and this is something that has really stood out to me personally, is in everything we've discussed, but that we can take that and apply it, to life in general, to so many different things, nuances. It's or as I say, the devil is in the detail. All these different little things, this small piece of information or this small perspective could change an entire the whole way you think about a certain topic, a subject, relationship, whatever the case might be. My father is notorious for that, and so he always tells me, Khalid, it's all about the details, all about the
Yeah.
detail. I'm like, I don't disagree.
Listen to your
I,
father.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I tell them I understand whether I understand it, whether I agree or not. I don't know, but anyway, Amal, I just have two more questions for you. These are questions I ask all my guests. So first of all, looking back at your life, either professionally, personally, whatever it might be, if I ask you the question, what are you most proud of for yourself? What would you say?
Most proud of. Uh, I have. You mean in achievement or in character or whatever comes to my mind or I'm
Whatever
just
comes to mind.
I have always felt gratified by the fact that I'm honest enough with myself and with others, committed enough to my value system and principles to be able to sleep very well at night. I don't know if it's a I don't know if it's a moment of pride, but I genuinely, a lot of people tend to think of this and they describe me as such, non-compromising and black and white. It's not that. It's extremely important for me to be at peace with my value systems and my conscience. And
Yeah.
people tend to think of it as a bit non-compromising and hard, but that it allows me to be very much at peace with myself and able to sleep at night. And in terms of achievements, I mean, look, there's not one thing that I'm most proud of per se. I'm very happy that I turned to writing a lot more. I'm proud of what I write. I like that entire experience. I like that mode of living, if you like. But in terms of achievements, I've always tried to live as 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 an honest, decent citizen, and I hope I haven't disappointed anyone in that. Who knows?
No. Yeah. Oh, I guess I'll never know.
Yeah,
But you know what? I really love that answer because I think at the end of the day, take everything away when you go to sleep at night. It's you and yourself, and I think if you can go to sleep feeling that I was true to myself, I spoke what I think, not maybe you're saying you're non-compromising. Yeah, in certain beliefs, I will be non-compromising, and that's fine. But as long as I'm okay with that, honestly, that's all that really
yeah,
matters. If I can go to sleep at night, with no regrets, I'm happy with myself and who I
yeah.
am. I think that's a huge accomplishment on its own. So I respect that a lot. And for my last question, Amal, what is the message you'd like everyone to take home with them today?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, uh, I think probably the need to always I look. I The one thing that was really rewarding for me is is being self-conscious. You need to be self-conscious of yourself, of your experience, of your work, your passions. I think to be constantly aware of the moment and of your life in it is something really quite necessary in order to have. I think I can generalize in that sense in order to have a certain kind of contentment, if you like, in the midst of a, a, a season of discontent, especially now. This book was, in many ways, my effort to achieve that. And I think in whichever way you or any other person can achieve that, through work, through art, through sports, through whatever it is. I mean, I have no way to be able to establish sort of like a list of ways that you can be self-conscious. But I think living life, really being aware of the moment and of its potentials and possibilities and pain and suffering, I think is important, to be very vulnerable that way. It's good to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more on the aspect of vulnerability. I know, that's something that obviously took me, I think, time to get there. I think everyone has their own journey when it comes to that. Everyone has their own comfort levels with how vulnerable they would like to be. But I love what you said about, being self-conscious of yourself, who you
Self-aware.
are, what you
Probably a
believe.
better
Yeah,
description is self-aware.
yeah,
Self-aware, yeah.
self-aware.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
no,
is
I res
misunderstood. Might be misunderstood. What I mean more specifically is self-aware, really, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally understand that, and I resonate, with that a lot. I think self awareness is something that is a never ending journey of discovery, where you're self aware out to date, where you will always have blind spots, and only with time and experience in life will you
Absolutely.
figure those out, and will that increase. Amal, I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. Honestly, this was such a different type of conversation for me. It made me you like I don't really speak about these things anyway, like with in general in my life. So having the opportunity to sit down and actually like have to gather my thoughts and like come up with questions and ask you and get your take and the things you said really opened my mind to like different aspects, different perspectives, gave me a new fresh of like a new awareness about, oh, this is that word, that immunity word, for example, that's what I'm doing. Okay, cool. Okay, now I have a different relationship with it. And it sounds like so many things we talked about are involved in your book, and the content, I'm sure it's an excellent book. I've done a quick skim. Unfortunately didn't have time to read the whole thing, but it's a great book for anyone
Thank
who's
you.
interested in learning more about your story and the story of, I think, that a lot of Arabs can resonate to across many different
Well, I
issues.
certainly
So I
hope so.
wanted to say thank you so much for that.
Thank
I
you.
really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Amal,
Thank you.
if anyone wants to reach out with you, connect with you, get
Can
your
go to
book,
my website.
could you tell us that?
Yeah, they can go to my website,
Okay.
amalghandour.com. That's
Okay.
amalghandour.com. There's an email there that is dedicated to that kind of communication, and the website should is very easy to navigate, and they will be able to connect with my old blog, with my new blog, This Arab Life. And by all means, if they want to reach out, just write me an email. The email is there, and I'm very happy to respond and engage. Absolutely. And thank you very much for having me, Khalid. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Guys, you heard it here. If you want to get in touch with Amal, just go to amalghandour.com. Her book's coming out soon. Make sure if this is an area they're interested in, make sure you go out and get it. Amal, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. To everyone listening, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to like, share, and follow and subscribe to the podcast at hope.it.helps on Instagram. And as always, guys, hope it helps. Peace.